Yes, sir. Your
Okay.
screen is visible.
So today I'm happy to be a part of this CME program conducted by IIHP. I'll be presenting a case of neuroblastoma stage 4 with multiple hepatic metastasis in a 5-month-old baby, and it's complete remission through homeopathic treatment. This is a case report which I'm trying to present. So for this presentation, you can see my slide. This was presented last year in February 2020 in the International Conference for Integrative Oncology, which is held in Kochi in Kerala. And there I was fortunate to be awarded the second prize among the 40 oral presentations which were done on oncology from the Ayush systems as well as the fundamental research stream and the allopathic stream. So this is the case which I am trying to present before you. So my co-authors are Dr. Vinita Susan Jacob and Dr. Saifuddin A. So Dr. Saifuddin A is a retired CMO in the Department of Homeopathy Kerala. He is the person who is actually, or the physician who has actually treated this case. So I am sharing the experience I am having along with him in this treatment. And Dr. James Michael, who was my former student and was a SRF in the CCRH. So this case is very close to my heart. So the reason for that I'll tell you at the end. After finishing the case, I'll tell you why. So at introduction to the topic, so neuroblastoma, as you can see, it is a embryonal tumor of the nerve system which occurs in very young children. So it's a like infantile period and the very young children who are affected by this embryonal tumor of neuroblastoma. And the importance is that it is the most common malignancy in infancy, as well as being the most common extracranial solid tumor in children. So it's very common, you can see. So when you look at the statistics, you can understand this. So it covers about 7 to 10% of all the pediatric neoplasms and about 50% of the malignancies diagnosed in infancy. So during the 1-year period, 50% of the malignancies which are diagnosed are from the neuroblastoma. So it shows the importance of this particular tumor in the percentage of malignancies diagnosed in infancy. And the main sites for this tumor are the adrenal gland and the mediastinum. The most important part to be noticed in this is that it has a very highly variable clinical presentation. It can be just a asymptomatic mass which you are looking at, which was found out in a routine ultrasound abdomen, or it can be a primary tumor with a widely disseminated disease, which you can see in this particular case. So here we are looking at a primary tumor with a widely disseminated disease. So before going to the case proper, a little more about the prognosis of the case. So this is a statistics from the USA. There is around 700 children are diagnosed each year with this malignancy, and that represents about 8% of all pediatric neoplasms. But even though it is only 8%, because of the fatal outcome, it disproportionately it accounts for 15% of the childhood deaths. That is an important thing to remember in this. Then the overall survival. So that is a very important thing which you look at when you are treating malignancy. When you look at the overall survival, it has improved over a period of time, but even then, 36% of the cases present with a metastatic high-risk disease that is difficult to cure. So 36% of the cases, that's a very important percentage, presents with a metastatic high-risk disease, so which is very difficult to cure. So for such patients, when you're looking at the treatment options which are available nowadays are multimodal therapy like myeloablative chemotherapy. We are looking at chemotherapy, we are looking at radiotherapy, immunotherapy, and aggressive surgery. So these are the modalities of the multimodal therapy which is available. So even then, the overall survival rate remains below 40%. So you're looking at the fatal outcome or the fatal prognosis of the disease of around more than 36% of these cases. So the take-home message is that the overall survival is poor in high-risk cases. So this is a study which is done in India, like around 19 patients who were given autologous stem cell transplantation. Out of them, only 4 are alive out of the 19. That means 21% are alive and in remission after this autologous stem cell transplantation which is done. So overall survival in such cases you can see is very poor in these high risk cases with the metastatic disease. Now I'm coming to the case proper. Case proper is you can see a 5-month-old male infant, and the main complaint is a lump in the abdomen. So this is the only presenting complaint which is available in the patient. And the diagnosis was made over a period of 1 or 2 months. It was diagnosed as a neuroblastoma stage 4 case with multiple metastatic deposits in the liver. So there were around 4 metastatic deposits in the liver and involvement of the contralateral para-aortic lymph nodes. So the involvement of the contralateral para-aortic lymph nodes was very important for the diagnosis of a stage 4 classification of the disease. So the stage 4 classification, the therapies which were advised by the consulting pediatric oncologist who was consulted at the Regional Cancer Center in Trivandrum. So she suggested chemotherapy in the beginning, followed by surgical resection of the tumor. So chemotherapy followed by, and if it is chemotherapy is responding well, the patient is responding well, then it will be followed by surgical resection. But even then, the final outcome after discussion by the pediatric oncologist was that maximum of a year of life. So even after all these therapies, aggressive therapies of chemotherapy and surgical resection. So after assessing the possible risks and the side effects, the guardians decided to opt for a safer option of homeopathy. So we are looking at a 5-month-old infant. So here the family history becomes very important. Much more important, I think, than in an adult, because the 5-month-old infant, there are very few things which you can get in such a case apart from observations by the parents and the grandparents. So the family history is of, or we can say, paramount importance in this case. So when you look at the family history, certain things were very clear. So some things I have highlighted in red that you can understand. At the last, I've given the importance of that. So the father of the patient had a history of repeated childhood asthma, a DPT overdose, stammering was important, then heavy epistaxis was there in this, which was recurrently seen, which was surgically removed. Then the mother of the patient, she had warts on the abdomen, DPN or dermatosis papulosa nigra, excessive hair growth, CSOM, hypertension, etc. On the paternal side, again, there was when the grandfather had bleeding piles, BHP, which is operated, hypertension, etc. The paternal grandmother, she had severe OA, cardiac problems, CAD, atrial fibrillation, cataract, hypertension, hypothyroidism, etc. And the maternal grandfather, seborrheic keratosis, BHP, warts, excessive hair growth on the body. The maternal grandmother also had a history of renal calculi, recurrent renal calculi, stroke, etc. So the red highlighted areas, if you look at them, you can very clearly make out there's a very strong the family history of psychosis in the family. So this was one of the very important considerations in the management of the case, because we are looking at a 5-month-old infant, and the family history of is of very great importance in this case. Now we come to the therapeutic intervention. So I'm just sharing some symptoms which were observed on different levels. So the first symptom which I mentioned is that the child or the infant was easily startled. So the child was brought to the consulting doctor at around 11 p.m. So he was in deep sleep at the time. And at that point of time, a phone came to the physician. The phone rang and he picked up the phone. The child suddenly woke up from the deep sleep, just hearing the bell of the phone or the ring of the phone. The child woke up from sleep and started crying. This is something which was observed by the physician. So it was very deep sleep. So throughout the whole journey to the physician's consultation, the child was deep asleep, but just on hearing the phone bell, he woke up and started crying. So this easily startled nature is an important symptom in this case. So woke up from a deep sleep from the ring of a phone. So this you can see how it is reflected in the different materia medicas, how the symptom is reflected. In Allen's keynote, you can see this. So I'm not saying the name of the remedy, so I'll give you a chance, all of you, to think over the remedy by the time I present the case. So extremely sensitive, starting at the least sound. This is given in Allen's keynotes regarding this particular remedy. Then intense nervous sensibility starting at the slightest sound. So this is given in the Clark's dictionary, so which is one of the source books of our materia medica also. Then starting from the least slightest noise, Kent gives this description about the remedy. Then the book by Candigabe. Candigabe is a Latin American author, famous Latin American author, after Pachero. So he has described this remedy in his comparative materia medica as a tendency to be easily startled, especially by noise. And the same book, he also mentions this patient is hypersensitive to his environment and easily startled. And then coming to our Indian materia medicas, we have Phatak, which says that everything startles this patient. So this easily startled was a very important finding in this infant of 5 months, which is observed by the treating physician. The second symptom, which was observed by the parents, you can say, was this child had an extremely hot thermal reaction. So whichever climate it was, he used to warm the fan at full speed and would start trying if the fan was switched off or if the speed was brought down, and try to remove all the coverings, the socks or whatever covering was on the body. He would try to take it off because of this extreme sensitivity to the heat. So aggravation covering, that is, Allen says about this remedy in this. And in Phatak again, you can see this better from fresh air, from being fanned. And Clark says that he wants to be fanned. He throws off covering and he craves fresh air. So these are all mentioned under Clark. And Kent again says that he must be fanned all the time, throws the clothes off. So you may be thinking why I'm saying all the symptoms in different materia medicas. Sorry, just a minute. So the different materia medicas I'm telling because this remedy which has been prescribed for this patient was one which would not have come up in the normal repertorization using our repertories. That's why I'm going into the materia medica in detail for discussion.
Sir, Medorinum is the medicine.
Yeah, you can come up. We are just going to more details. Okay. Then this desires. So you'll be wondering how we got these desires in a 5-month-old child. So this was something which the child had started on solid food. So whatever the parents could come across in his preferences in relation to food. So this were shared with the treating physician. So that is how we saw a very strong craving for this salt, sweet, and sour things. So especially when you come to the repertory, again, you can see in Clark, in Grimmer, and in Allen's keynote about this combination of sour, salt, and sweet craving, and a craving again for ice cream. This is very prominent at that point of time. So these different tastes were very prominent in the craving. So this we see in a Mitra Medica, like when we are looking at different cases, we have combination of cravings coming very important. For example, when we say salt and sweet, we think of agendum nitricum. So when we say salt and sour, we think of veratrum alb. So there are different remedies. When we even look up at the repertory, we can, and if you see a great aversion to salt, sweet, fish and meat, then we think of graphitis. So this desires aversions become all the more important when you are looking at a chronic case from understanding the depth of a chronic case. So these were some symptoms which are observed and shared with the physician. Then this another thing was which was noticed was excessive thirst and hunger. So this the child would wake up in the middle of the night and crying. So even after feeding milk, he used to cry. Then he has to be given some solid food in the night, in the middle of the night. So this was again shared by the parents. So that thirst and hunger, both were very prominent. You can say a ravenous hunger and an excessive thirst. This is very prominent. This was again seen in all the important materials in Allen, Clark, and Kent. And this symptom, when we are looking at a chronic case, the position of sleep is an important symptom. So this here you can see always or almost always you can see the child had a desire to lie on the abdomen. So the sleep position, abdomen on, that is a 3-mark symptom in the synthesis repertory, and also mentioned in Phatak also you can see this remedy coming in important. And the last 2 symptoms. So there you can see the development of the case. So history of psychosis is there, and then resulting in carcinoma, cancerous conditions, either acute or chronic in development. So symptoms are corresponding and a history of psychosis can be traced. So this is very clearly, the understanding of this sentence has a lot to play in this particular case. So in Allen's keynote is very clearly mentioned, and also in Phatak's repertory also, Mitra Medica also you can see this tumors, cancer, serous cancer with a history of psychosis. So psychosis coming in the background, prominently in the family, and the history of psychosis and the correspondence of symptoms. So here you can see the correspondence of symptoms also has a very major role to play along with the history of psychosis, and which develops into malignancy at the end. So these are the symptoms which you can see. So as I think Arun has mentioned, medorinum is the remedy. So why I told you this Mitra Medica background of the case is that because medorinum as a remedy normally has a very less chance of coming out when you're normally repertorizing through our usual repertories, or you'll have to depend on the repertory of Nosort by Berkeley Square or like that. If you go, then only normally medorinum will not come out in repertorization using the normal repertories which you are generally using. That's why I have gone into a little detail for the Mitra Medica part of this case. So medorinum was started, and this was given in the 50 millesiemens potency, 0/3 TDS. So like in April 2nd, 2002, this was started. So in short, you can say like after this treatment, the size of the hepatic metastatic deposits started decreasing. So there were 4 deposits, they came down to 2. The 2 of them, the bigger ones, started decreasing. Then from 4 it came down to 2, and then it came down to 0. All the deposits disappeared. So that is how it was completely followed by the complete disappearance of all the deposits, and followed by the decrease in the size of the primary tumor. So this was happening under the administration of medorinum 50 millesiemens thrice daily, and a very strict diet. Very strict diet means like in chronic cases which you are dealing with, especially in malignancies, diet has a lot of role to play, especially when you're dealing with meat and non-vegetarian diets. So non-vegetarian diets will have a negative role. This is an observation by the physician also, who has had a lot of experience in treating such type of terminally ill cases. So this was the diet was stuck onto very prominently. Even I think instead of milk, the soya milk was given for a lot of time instead of cow's milk. So a lot of that, like that, a lot of things were looked into while treating this patient. So the outcome was that the size of the deposits started decreasing, and then they disappeared completely, and then the primary tumor started also decreasing in the size. So this is something in nutshell regarding the investigations done. So this was in January when the initial investigation was done. So in April, late April, we started the treatment. So in January, when the CT scan was done, it was in Regional Cancer Center, Trivandrum. So the neuroblastoma measuring 6.9 to 6.7 to 5 centimeters. This was the initial size. And there were multiple calcifications in the upper para-aortic region. So this was actually related to the para-aortic lymph nodes of the opposite side which were involved. They had calcified. And on FNAC of the left lumbar mass, malignant round cell neoplasm was suspected and as a neuroblastoma. And then the next, so from January, the next scan was done. So by the time we can see the development of the tumor. So in April, we had started the treatment. So in the beginning of April, the mid-April when this scan was done, there was mild hepatomegaly with multiple hypoechoic areas. So these hypoechoic areas were representing the metastatic lesions. And this left suprarenal mass, which was 81 into 66 millimeters. So you can see a little more increase in size of the tumor by the beginning of, so during this 3-month period from January to April. So in April, then we started the treatment. So the next ultrasound was done, you can see in a year after. So this whole year you can see the patient was under Mederanum 0/3 and no other medication, thrice daily with a strict diet control also. So the next year, almost at the same time, 4403, you can see the ultrasound was done. And there the neuroblastoma size had decreased a little. So it came down to 7 centimeter with still the liver metastasis was there, but the para-aortic lymph nodes were not enlarged. It was one finding which you could see at that point of time. The next ultrasound was done again, you can say after again a year. So that was in 2004. So June 2004. So there you can see the resolution of the hepatic metastatic deposits. They started resolving, and the size of the tumor, there was a marked diminution. So the marked decrease in the size of the adrenal mass was there. So which was earlier 81 into 66, which came down to 7. With that has come down to 2.1 width into 2.1 centimeter craniocaudally. So you can see it's almost like a 1/3 it has come down. And then there were some developments actually, you can say after so that is almost 4 years down the line, there were some developments. You can say some symptoms also changed in the patient. So you can say from 2002 to April to 2004, or almost till the beginning of 2005, the patient was on Mederanum 0/3 only, no other change of potency, no other change of medication, because there's a gradual improvement in the objective findings. And apart from the objective findings, there were no other signs or symptoms, because there was no difficulty with the child was presenting with, apart from the objective, the hepatic problems and the hepatic metastasis and the primary tumor. So in 31/5/2005, you can see there's a slight increase in the size of the tumor. So from 2.1, 2.7, it has gone to, so that is centimeters, or 21 into 27, it has gone down to 30, increased to 35 into 43. So the mass is still there, but it has increased a little in size. So, and that was the period when there were some new symptoms also developed in the patient. And the last ultrasound, so there a medicine was changed again. I'm coming to that. So a medicine was changed from Mederanum because new symptoms were developed. So it was not the same medicine which was indicated. A new medicine was given. And after that, one more year down the line, that is 2006, you can see a ultrasound which shows that there is no evident abnormality detected. So I'll come to that ultrasound in detail when we go again to the case. So this was the timeline of the investigations done and the difference in the difference showed in the objective findings by the management of through homeopathy. So you can see, as you can see, that after 2 years, the tumor started slightly increasing, new symptoms appeared, the prescription was changed. So that means by the time like June 2000, like you can see when the patient was almost 4 years old, the symptoms change. So the thermal reaction is the same, but there are two symptoms which are very marked, which came out, you can say marked hyperactivity. So this is the time when 4 years old, so he started moving around. So, and then this hyperactivity tendency was very marked and intense restlessness. So wherever he was, like he was starting to go to some of the small classes, so he was very restless. So this you can see under the remedy which was subsequently prescribed, that was arsenicum iodatum. So meteorinum was stopped, and so after this period of almost 4 years, this meteorinum was stopped, and then it was shifted to ars iodine. So ars iodine, you can see this is a short account of ars iodine which is given in Materia Medica Viva by George Vithoulkas. It's one of the most restless remedies in our Materia Medica. So normally we think about aconite, arsenic, and rust oxide, and we are happy with these three as the restless remedies in a Materia Medica. But here he says that this is one of the most restless remedies in a Materia Medica, and it produces a physical and mental restlessness that can be described as physical unrest. The body cannot find rest, cannot remain calm, or in one position for long. So there you can say a combination of arsenic and iodine. Iodine and arsenic both are highly restless, and this combination is seen here in a hot patient. So the patient wants to do things all the time. He cannot sit still at all. It's a combination of the restlessness of arsenic and iodine. So he says that, Vithoulkas says that there cannot be a worse restlessness than this. So it comes to the top of the understanding of the remedies for restlessness. Arsenicum iodatum is a remedy, I think, which we very seldom generally use in such conditions, but has to be always thought of for restlessness. And it's one of the very important remedies for hyperactive disorder, for ADHD, and similar conditions also. So this is a account of arsenic iodatum which was given by Vithoulkas in his Materia Medica Viva, the exclusive Materia Medica which is written by Vithoulkas on different remedies. So again, there's a comparative study on Kent's Materia Medica by Gaskin. He also mentions ars iodide as having restlessness and weakness. Restlessness again in Kent's repertory, and in synthesis repertory again it's Threma, and in hyperactive children. And one more thing which was observed in this child was that, so the child was the parents and the child used to lie on a mattress on the floor. So whenever he wanted to pass urine, he used to go outside. There was a mosquito net was kept, and he used to go outside the mosquito net, pass urine, and come back and then lie down and go to sleep. So he would never urinate on the mosquito inside the on the mattress during his sleep. So this is something which is again observed as a nature of fastidiousness, something related to cleanliness in this child, which was even at the small age, you can see. So these symptoms, this thermal reaction still remaining hot, so the meteorinum is hot. Ars iodide is actually again very hot remedy with marked hyperactivity, restlessness, and this fastidious nature. That was the indication for turning or changing the remedy to ars iodide. And after that, so after ars iodide, the 0/3 was given for a year. The primary tumor was observed to have completely resolved. So that is completely gone. So this was an observation. So over a period of, so you can see you are looking at a time frame of 2002 April to 2006 May. So that is almost a 4-year period. When a lot of developments have happened, the primary and the multiple hepatic metastases, they have reduced gradually, and then the hepatic metastases have resolved completely. The primary has again increased. A new remedy was given, and then after 1 more year, the primary has completely resolved. So this is the timeline or time frame which we are looking at, a 4-year period for the complete disappearance of the primary and the tumors and the metastatic deposits. So this is the last ultrasound you can see, which was done in 2006, May 2006. So there you can see the impression. The kidneys, there's no finding, and there is no obvious para-aortic lymphadenopathy or any ascites. There is no evident abnormality seen. There's no suprarenal mass in this ultrasound. According to this, they have suggested a CECT abdomen for further evaluation and confirmation, which was not done. But even then, this ultrasound does not reveal any findings which were consistently seen earlier. So this was the last ultrasound which was done in 2006, where there was no evident abnormality, no suprarenal mass, no para-aortic lymphadenopathy or ascites. There were some inferences which could be drawn from this case. The inference one was, this was a case where I could exactly follow the Hering's law of direction of cure. So we study this in when we are learning Organon, Hering's law of cure, direction of cure, something which we see, but in many cases we are unable to perceive that properly. But this was a case where completely every step of the treatment, I could see the law of direction of cure being followed. The size of the multiple hepatic metastasis decreased, followed by complete disappearance, and then followed by the complete resolution of the primary tumor. So this happened like very over a period of 4 years, but it could be very clearly understood at what level it was happening. So that is one homeopathic inference which I have tried to draw from this. Then another is this aphorism 36 in Organon of Medicine, which is observed to be true throughout the period of treatment of this case. So you can, so you're all treating children, infants. So you know the mothers and fathers come to you with lot of complaints. So this aphorism 36, you can see like here, this in Organon of Medicine. So this is somebody's, please mute the phone. Excuse me.
Dr. Vijay,
Could you please mute the? So after the presentation, we can have a discussion on like whatever you want to. I think we can do it. So so here this 36 algorithm you can see that is if two dissimilar diseases meeting together in the human being are of equal strength, or still more if the older one be the stronger. So here we are looking at this disease, this solid malignant tumor in the child or in the infant, which is from 5th month onwards, this is there in the child, and therefore what I could see is that the new disease will be repelled by the old one from the body and not allowed to affect it. So that means anything else happening in the child is very rarely seen. So normally children of this age, the infancy period, is a time where you have a lot of fevers, a lot of gastrointestinal infections, diarrhea, a lot of cough, respiratory infections. These are all very common in infants and in children, that particular age group. But in this child, actually, we could notice that apart from the time when he was given the polio, oral polio medication, there were no problems in the child. So when the oral polio medication was given, he used to cry a lot, and then we had to give some medication to control this. Otherwise, there was no history of any. There was no history of any upper respiratory infections. Please mute the phone. There's no history of any recurrent upper respiratory diseases or any upper respiratory illnesses or any cold or cough, which are very common in this age group, or any diarrhea-like conditions, fevers, which are very common in this age group. None of these happen. So this understanding, I think, is based on this aphorism 36, which Hahnemann mentions, when there are two dissimilar conditions which are occurring, which are in which the older one, if it is stronger, the new one will be repelled. So wherever the new thing, the new infection was coming, I think this must have been repelled by the stronger affection in the body, which was continually there for this period of time. So that is these two observations I could make through while following up this case over the period of 4 to 5 years. That is, one is Hering's law of cure, and especially the direction of cure, and the aphorism 36, which was seen operative in this case. So conclusion which I can say in this case is that, so normally when we are looking at such a case, in the initial slides also I tried to say, we have options of multimodal therapy. That means chemotherapy, radiation, resection, or combining these methods together. These are given for neuroblastoma patients, especially who are having this high-risk metastatic involvement disease. So this is the conventional method of treatment. But in this case, like only with the homeopathic management, we could achieve a complete remission. And this suggests a scope for homeopathy in such cases without the harmful risks which are associated with other conventional methods. Because harmful risks, because this, when the case was discussed initially with the pediatric oncologist, what she could say was that even after all these managements, chemotherapy, aggressive surgery, a period of 1 year was what she could give for the case, for the child, of the 5-month-old child. So in spite of all this aggressive allopathic management, this was the time period which could be added on to the life of the child. So here you can look at a scope of homeopathy which is much beyond that chemotherapy, radiation, or resection, or combination of all these things. In such a condition which is very common in children, 50% of childhood malignancies we have mentioned. So without the harmful risks which are associated with the other conventional methods. So this is the 5-month-old child now. Now he is 19 years old. And now I'll say why this case is close to my heart, because this is actually my son. So this is my son who was diagnosed, and we were the parents who gave all the feedback to the consulting physician, because I was not in a frame of mind to treat my own son at a particular point of time. So this case was followed up very closely, and it was a very extremely learning experience for me to follow up this case and to see the scope of homeopathy unfolding through the management of this case. And I'm very thankful to Dr. Saifuddin, who is still practicing in Trivandrum, who is a very excellent physician, excellent observer in homeopathy. I think that the art of observing patients is dying out in homeopathy. We just hear something, we write down the next medicine. Looking at the patient, touching the patient, seeing the patient, and trying to perceive the case. So this is something which I'm very thankful for, the learning experience provided to me and my wife from Dr. Saifuddin, who has managed this case extremely well. And this case I've tried to present. So if you look at the bibliography, the allopathic references I've given, and at the end I've given a reference which is highlighted in black letters. So that is important, the bold one. So this is a development of a supplement home case to the CARE clinical case reporting guideline. So I would want to share a little about that. So this case, when I was asked, or when I was thought of presenting in this oncology conference, international conference, I thought it should be not like a normal case presentation. So I tried to search for a case format to fit this case into. So then I came across this home case. So there's a universal care guidelines is there for reporting of cases, clinical cases, in allopathy also. This care guidelines was modified by Van Hasselen to suit homeopathy. So that is why we are given this name of home case care guidelines. So you can say for this particular reporting of homeopathy cases. So this, I think, as far as possible, I've tried to follow this in reporting this case, but because it's an infant, so many of the things could not be followed like following the reporting in an adult. But if it's an adult, there are much more elaborate guidelines are there. So this, I think this will help you. So if you can look it up on the internet, you can get definitely the guidelines in detail, this care guidelines and this home case guidelines by Van Hesselen. So this will help you to present a case properly, report a case properly when you are presenting to any scientific community. Because why I'm telling this is because normally when you present, if you are presenting only to a homeopathy community, it is okay. But if you are presenting the way I presented it to in the integrative oncology conference, so the jury who was hearing the case, they were actually from multiple disciplines. So they were researchers were there. So they didn't have much questions to ask me because I had followed this type of a pattern in presenting the case. So this is something which I think all the listeners who are interested in, who are already practicing, who have very good cases with you, you can utilize this type of a home case care guidelines for making a presentation, for reporting the case, for publishing in any international or national journal. So this is something which I wanted to share with you. So now we can go to any particular discussion about this particular case. Doubts, as far as possible, I can share with you. Okay. So I see some of my students are also listening in. So this is something which taught me a lot in because this case I had discussed with another very famous homeopath from Kerala, Dr. Chandrasekharan. So what he told me was, this is a condition where you will not get time for action of the medicine. So he was already a very senior homeopath, almost on the level of Dr. Saifuddin, but he told me there's no time for medicine to act. This is a very highly aggressive tumor. You will not get any time. So you can try medicine, but basically go for the allopathic management in this case. So this was a very eye-opening experience for me also, and restored a lot of experience, faith in the way homeopathy could function in such a case, provided we are willing to observe and follow the pattern of, follow a proper guideline of prescription. So 50 millismol, I think somebody had commented about 50 millismol, why it was given. So this was something which, I had talked to Dr. Saifuddin in detail. So he used to give almost all the chronic cases he used to treat. He used to give 50 millismol. So even when he was a CMO in the department, he used to take 50 millismol medicines, which when they were not available in the dispensary, he used to take them from home and dispense them to the patient. So what I could see also, what I could also learn while giving 50 millismol is that you can moderate the dose, you can modulate the dose. So whenever you want to give a single dose, you can give a single dose. Whenever you want to step up the dose, you can go even to 5 doses per day, or you can go to 1 dose per week. So whatever you want to do with the dosage, you can manage. So because if you are giving a high potency, like you are giving a 1M or a 10M or a 50M or CM, you wait for a period of time, then only you interfere with the case. So here you can keep on the same medicine with a different dosage, seeing the action of the remedy. So in this particular case, actually, because there's a consistent action was there, consistent progress was there in the case, the dosage which was followed was almost the same. So you can see, and this is very astonishing for me also, that a single remedy in the same potency could act for almost 3 to 4 years. So Meteoronum 50 millismol 0/3 was seemed to act for almost 3 to 4 years, and there was no need of interfering because there was no new symptoms developing or new findings which are observed. So only when the symptoms changed, only when the size of the primary increased, then only there was a need of thinking of a new medication or changing the medicine. That also again was given in the 50 millismol potency. So 50 millismol is a potency which is very useful for chronic diseases, especially in like cases of diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia. So a lot of conditions which we are dealing with daily. We can think of this 50 millismol. So this is the experience which I gained in like learning from this case about 50 millismol prescription, and the importance of diet also. I think this is something which earlier in the beginning of the case I used to like have a constant dialogue with Dr. Saifuddin was stating my son regarding not giving non-vegetarian diet, because this was the development age of the child. So like the period of development of the child was this. So why you have to say that don't give meat or fish or egg and all these things. So that was something which he also shared, that so you just do a study when you're managing chronic cases, terminally ill cases, like malignant cases, with and without non-vegetarian diet. So he had a very clear understanding and clear experience to share with why this management of this case along with a strict guideline. So this is something which I could understand also from, because when we were before going to starting with homeopathy, I had researched all over the globally also for understanding about this neuroblastoma and the management of neuroblastoma, because we were not even able to come to terms with understanding how this diagnosis came and what we were to do. We were actually confused as to what guideline to develop for management. So when I was looking up around in the treatment about neuroblastoma in the States, United States, so I could see that there they have a special nutritionist. Every particular have a this at the Sloan Kettering Center, for whom patients come from all over the world, and they have a special diet pattern. So like certain guidelines were given to the. So this is something which I could management also, that non-vegetarian diet cut down the protein and other things are also good. The importance of a strict diet pattern, and then the importance of the 50 millisimal some learning point I could get from this particular case. So 50 millisimal was the potency given in the beginning with Meteranum also, and when the change happened after 3 to 4 years, when Arsairate was given, there also 50 millisimal. He asked me to give 5 times daily, but it was like in a child it was very difficult to give, so we tried to follow from 3 to 4 times daily. That was the pattern which we followed. So that was the dosage and the potency which was followed for the management of this case. Anything else? Any doubts which are regarding? So if I think if this case, if this primary would have resolved by its own, we would not have gone for a thought of a new potency or a new medicine. But in this case, the case came to a standstill when there were new symptoms developed, and then the symptoms development and the primary started slightly increasing. So these are the two indications why we thought of why the treating physician thought of a new medication. And I can confess that I actually only after a year I was told about the medication, what was being given in this particular case, because the Dr. Saifuddin was a diploma holder and I being a MD holder, he had some reservations regarding whether I would accept this prescription of this medication and all. So, but I was very open because this was my child who was being treated, so I was very open to learn anything, and especially the depth of experience which I could get from interacting with Dr. Saifuddin. I think I have not got from any other doctors in Delhi or elsewhere. So because that is the level of knowledge of Medica and repertory which he used to share with me. So this is one enlightening experience with these medications, these medicines, and the depth to which they could act on such a case. And one more thing I can share with you is that this when the diagnosis came of stage 4 neuroblastoma, there was a big conference was called in the regional cancer center, because at that point of time the staging of neuroblastoma staging which we have at present right now was not developed. So there was a discussion. So there was a scope. There was a condition called neuroblastoma S. Neuroblastoma S was a condition which was self-limiting, which used to self-regress. So we both of us were praying that this would be one of that neuroblastoma S conditions which would automatically regress. But then that is after the discussion of the Department of Imageology, Radiology, and all the departments discussed this case. They came, when I went and met them, they said, no, this is not stage S, this is actually stage 4, because there is multiple hepatic metastasis and the contralateral para-aortic lymph nodes are involved. So when the contralateral para-aortic lymph nodes are involved, this cannot be stage S, which can go into a spontaneous regression, but this is definitely a stage 4, which has only 1 year to live. So this is something which again, which was discussed, which came to my mind when I was share with you when I was discussing this case.
Sir, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
Sir, why sir started with the potency 0/3? Why not 0/1 was used in the first prescription?
Yeah, maybe like I'm not very clearly sure about why 0/1 was not used, because I think maybe like everybody has their own starting potency to whenever I used to see his prescriptions, he used to start with 50 millisieverts 0/3. So I am not very particular, because even when I asked him, he would not give a very clear-cut answer to this particular issue of why 0/3 was given. And even Arzairad was given was 0/3 again. So this I don't have a very clear-cut answer to, because even he was not able to just, maybe it's like a little bias on his side, I would not say, but because maybe of his treating experience, because experience is something which will make impression on you when you start treating patients of different types of chronic illnesses and malignancies. So it may be his experience that he has seen the maximum like the results with the 0/3 potency may have caused him to start the treatment with 0/3. So otherwise, there is no particular indication why not 0/3 and not 0/6. Because I've seen a lot of people going some prescriptions where you have seen people jumping from 0/1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6. Within a period of 6 months, they go to 0/1 to 0/6. But this is a case where I could see 0/3 for 3 to 4 years. So this is something which is very new to me also. And but again, like I will confess that I don't know the exact reason why 0/3 and not 0/1. So this I cannot give a clear-cut answer. Maybe a little experience, like his experience maybe with the starting potency of 0/3, he must have seen more cases responding well. So that must be the reason why, because when he changed also, he changed to 0/3 Arzairad only. So that is maybe the reason. I cannot very clearly say or clearly justify why he has made that prescription of 0/3.
Okay, sir. Any other questions from anyone?
This is Ashok. This is good afternoon to you. I have little question to the doctor. Could I do that?
Yes, definitely.
You see, while managing with the homeopathic cure or for cancer, there are radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Some comments of your experience while managing the case, along with the side effect of this chemo or radiotherapy. You got it?
Yeah, what you mean is that like patients who are coming to, especially patients coming to homeopathy, they come up as the last resort. That's what I think
Not
all of us feel.
exactly. Yeah, normally it happens they are coming on the last, but the cure for chemotherapy and radiotherapy is still going on. We cannot stop them.
Yeah, definitely. What I'm saying is that when patients generally like coming to homeopathy for terminally ill condition, they'll come at the, like they'll try. I'm not blaming them, or you cannot blame them also, because what they see is the allopathic system is there. So they will try for a system which is familiar to them. So they'll go there, and if it again recurs, or if the system of the complaint comes back to you, if there is a metastasis, or if it is not able to manage, or the patient says that, or the treating physician says that there's nothing else to do, you go home, then they go for alternative methods. So when they come to us, like especially if they are still on chemotherapy or on radiotherapy, I don't generally say that you stop all these things and come to me. So because already they may be in a very advanced stage, so I just try to manage the cases coming to me. But only thing is that when we are there on chemo and on radiotherapy, most of the actual symptoms of the case may not be there. So this was a case when we had very clear-cut symptoms, because there were no other interference with any other therapy was not there. So clear-cut observations could be made in the case, objective findings were there. But once in chemotherapy and radiotherapy, there will be a lot of changes in the patient where you get a very complex picture coming to you, and where you will not be in a state to understand a particular polycrust remedy as a prescription. So there you will have to think of small remedies like especially radiotherapy and chemotherapy, like remedies like radium bromide, X-ray, or manganum aceticum. These may be like tried in between to boost up the blood counts, etc. when the patient is coming already on chemo or radiotherapy, because you cannot stop the patient completely from all the therapies and tell them that I will be taking over your treatment. So along with this management, along with the allopathic management, if you are managing the case, along with you may have to think of small remedies like X-ray, radium bromide, manganum aceticum. These are three remedies which I have seen of use in the lower potencies for managing the blood cell counts which are going down during these invasive methods. So along with that, you can manage the patient. If you are looking at a fresh case, then definitely you have a lot of things. And in such cases, these cases which you have mentioned, the best thing is to go for a remedy when you can go for an anamnesis of the case. So you will have to go to a period of time before the development of this illness, when the symptoms, what were the symptoms at that point of time, what was the presenting complaints, what was the symptoms at that point of time, what was the generalities at that particular point of time. That may lead you to a prescription, because now the patient comes to you with a very complex picture of all these altered signs and symptoms, plus the bad effects of chemo and radiotherapy or whatever therapies are being done. So you don't get a clear-cut picture of any clear-cut polycrust remedy for you to start prescription. So you may have to go for a detailed analysis of the case and see what happened before or at the onset of the illness. What was the presenting? What were the generalities? What was the mental picture? What was the physical generalities of the patient? And then try to think of some remedy which will cover that, along with the small type of like remedies which I mentioned, which to deal with the acute emergencies which happen during this management.
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. Thank you very much, and especially good wishes for your son and for your this case presentations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. George. It was really a nice case. Could you please tell me about the indications of carcinosin? Did you ever think of it?
In this case, actually, like I was not, first of all, I would say I was not the prescribing physician. But even then, in this case, I think the symptoms were very clear. That is why I think there was not even a change of the remedy for a long period. So carcinosin, when we think of, either we think of as a anti-cancerous remedy, or as we think of as a intercurrent remedy in cancer, we think of carcinosin, or as a remedy which has come as a symptomatically indicated remedy. These are the levels on which we think of carcinosin. But in this case, I think because of the clear-cut picture of very clear-cut picture of medrainum, there was no other thought of even deviating from this for the prescribing physician. And when he changed, he didn't even think of a higher potency of medrainum. He changed to an entirely different remedy. So all these the prescriptions I had discussed with him after actually the total cure was happening or happened. Only then I had discussed in detail with him what were the indications, because at that point of time I was not in a, you can say, not in a frame of mind to completely assimilate what was going on or try to see the rationale behind each and every prescription. But then after the case was completely cured, then I sat down with him and then tried to analyze why he thought of this prescription. And this case, actually, there was not even a repertorization was done, because it was very clear in his mind that this Medryanum. So there's no need of any other, because his method of treatment is that in the beginning he was a person who used to repertorize a lot, and he is a very good, has a very good working knowledge of repertory also. But now, like at the fag end of his career, you can say now he's more than 60, 65. He never uses the repertory. I've never seen him using the repertory, because his level of mathematical knowledge is so phenomenal that, because it is incorporated, almost all the symptoms in repertory also have been incorporated into his mathematical knowledge. So carcinosin did not come into his mind, because this clear-cut picture was in the beginning itself, it was there. And when it changed also, the change also was very clear, which pointed him to this particular prescription of arsenate. So that is why maybe the reason why carcinosin is not thought of in this case. So carcinosin normally we think of as an intercurrent remedy, or as a intercurrent remedy for cancer, or as very clearly indicated on the basis of the physical and the mental traits we can think of. But in this particular case, I think because of the clear or very obvious nature of the symptomatology, that is why it was not thought of. That is what I could understand.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. George. It was a fascinating witnessed, and we today share with you your experience, which has been no doubt very painful, but very rewarding, and gives us the insight into the richness of this system, which we most of the time having a doubt in our own mind, because it is a phenomenal science having so many areas of delicacy, which probably we keep on learning in our practice and through the wisdom of our seniors. So today we have learned, experienced, and felt many dimensions of a condition where we are involved in treating. So thank you once again. You have shared beautifully a very fascinating personal story to us.
So one more thing I would like to share in this case is that this every time we used to do the ultrasounds of the abdomen when we went to Kerala, back to Kerala, I used to contact the pediatric oncologist in Regional Cancer Center, Trivandrum. So I had told her that because of the options she had given, there was that 1 year of life, even after chemotherapy and surgery, there's only 1 year of life, which she could say in this case. So I had told her that we are not going along with allopathic management. We are going for homeopathic treatment. So she was okay with that because she could understand our concerns also, and our, especially regarding this treatment. So every time we used to go do the ultrasound, I used to share with her, because this pediatric oncologist was one of the, she was the aunt of one of my juniors, Dr. Vinu Krishnan, who was also was a faculty in neurohomeopathy college in the beginning. So so I used to share with her the ultrasound details. And at the end of the treatment, that is in 2006, when the last ultrasound came, and when I mentioned this to her, when I sent her the reports, she was very happy, and she actually asked me the name of the treating physician, and she herself, being a pediatric oncologist at RCC, now she is retired and leading a retired life. She used to refer a lot of cases, similar cases, to Dr. Saifuddin for treatment. So that was a very rewarding experience because he used to tell me that this case was sent from RCC by Dr. Kusuma Umari, who was the pediatric oncologist. So this was something which was, again, something we could give back to the system, and also give back to share with allopathic fraternity also, who could not, like, and she appreciated openly. She appreciated when I was about to prepare this case for this presentation. I contacted her for this for some guidelines regarding this, and she was very happy, and she was very happy to share with me whatever she could guide me in preparing this case presentation also. So something we could show to the allopaths also, that what homeopathy is capable of. So that was something very rewarding for me as a physician to learn. And because she used to refer so many cases to Dr. Saifuddin for management from RCC. So that is something which is very, very much appreciable on the part of a homeopathic physician. This is also something which I wanted to share with you all regarding this management and my experience. So this going to RCC or going to a cancer center once, especially in our frame of mind, it is a very devastating experience for me. But I am now, when I'm looking back at that experience, it has strengthened me a lot, and it is obviously it has enriched my knowledge of homeopathy as a therapeutic modality, much more superior, you can say, in many cases to allopathy, especially in such conditions. So this is something of a learning experience, eye-opening experience for me in this treating this case.
This is also a eye-opening experience for us also, through you.
Thank you, sir.
So, Dr. Arun can take over from here. Dr. Arun is listening.
Hello.
Dr. Arun. Yes, please,
Hello.
Dr. Arun.
Yes, sir.
Nice. Take over.
Okay. Thank you very much, George sir, for this nice presentation. I think we all learned a lot from this case. Thank you everyone for participating in this meeting. So I'm going to end this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all. And good evening to everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.